Greetings, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for our Wednesday session, which we continue and wrap up this series on building and shipping faster with AI. Today, I'm pleased to introduce once again our host for the series, David O'Hara, and today with him, Rich McCraw, who will be talking about data that delivers. And so I will turn it over to you.
Thank you, Tim. And thank you for joining us for the tail end of our series. So, going back over what we've covered in this series, we've been talking about how we can leverage our AI-assisted tools to build out a feature on our own platform, the Engage platform that we have here at Improving. And so we started out on October 1st with Bill Curry and talking about the state of AI and where things sit. And then we moved into the next week on October 8th with David Sandoval and talked about user experience and what experience we wanted out of this feature. Fast forward with Eric on October 15th, and he showed us how to use Windsurf to generate code and to deliver that feature. And then Aman showed us the ways that we can turn a platform into code and have infrastructure as code, and walked us through ways to deliver that feature to production. And here we wrap up now with Rich, who's going to talk to us a little bit about data engineering, analysis, and insights. So I look forward to hearing from Rich as he talks to us about where we are and what are some of the tools that we can utilize.
Thank you, David.
Today, we're going to cover, we've got the agenda for today. We're going to talk a little bit about the state of things. He's going to share with us a little bit about the benefits and maybe some challenges that we might need to pay attention to, and then dive into a demo and show us actual use of these data analytics. So, Rich, I look forward to hearing about the current state of things. Where are we at?
Great. Thanks, David. So, certainly, right, and I think we've shown kind of throughout this series, the current state of coding assistance and in general, generative AI is pretty both robust and kind of pervasive, right? Every platform has it. It's really becoming integrated in every part of the life cycle. Right, we saw it for UI, we saw it for code generation, for infrastructure as code and platform engineering. But what we want to talk about today is how we use it for data. And there are some unique challenges to how it should be or could be used for data that we're going to go through. And we're going to hopefully demo some things that are going to go really well, but also a few things that we hope will break in the way we intend. Right, to kind of show how these tools work in the real world for data, what parts of them we can really leverage today, and what parts we need to take a little more care with. So first off, right, what do we mean when we say using generative AI in the data space? And I want to be clear here because obviously there's an entire kind of realm of data, which is in the building, management, and training of these models. And that's really not what we're talking about today. We're talking about how we can use generative AI platforms to make both data developers more productive, but then also to begin to democratize data access to non-technical users or to technical users without having to write traditional SQL or Python or some other type of complex language to navigate your data models. So, as we do that, if we think back to what we've talked through in this series, right, it's not really replacing the tasks that data engineers or data analysts do today. It's about compression. How can we take pieces of that and make them significantly faster, significantly easier, and hopefully allow us to move between both data engineering and data analytics in a smoother and more rapid and agile way. So what that's going to mean in kind of the data AI assistance is we're going to do things like take how we're going to query the data, and we want to be able to use natural language, right, to be able to do that. We want to be able to take what might have been a static dashboard in the past and allow it to be a conversational system where users or analysts can ask natural language questions of the data, but still get back kind of robust and accurate reporting. We want to be able to use stories, right, or narratives about things we want to capture in data, and we want the tools to help us get there faster. And then finally, right, democratization of data. I don't want someone to have to know SQL or Python or some other language to be able to query the model, but I also don't want them to be limited by reporting tools as they may have been in the past. So some of the things that we're going to try and show today, right, are these use cases, right? So natural language to SQL, automated report generation, anomaly detection or alerting based on patterns that it can find in the data sets, and conversational data exploration. But as we do that, we have to take into account a few of the risks that generative AI brings as well in the data space, right? Certainly, data privacy and security becomes very important, right? It's important with all of the tools we use and all of the places we use generative AI. But in this case, we are truly giving the AI model access to our data, right? Both in structure and content. And so how we protect that data and how we protect what users will be able to see of that data becomes critically important. We don't want prompt injection, for instance, to be able to get around certain safeguards and leak data. Model accuracy and bias becomes very important. This is not just in the traditional sense, but one of the things you'll see as we use these tools is they have learned standardized coding patterns, right? They have learned kind of what standard table naming, function naming, column naming conventions are, and they will try and apply them. And that works great unless your model doesn't conform. And so how do we help the tools, right, navigate that better? Over-reliance. We're going to talk here in a minute about deterministic answers for data, how we get a report to give us the same answer every time. And so one of the things you'll see is with generative AI tools, I can get great conversational answers. And that is true across almost all the platforms. But the real challenge in doing that right with data is to do it in a way where we know that the answers that it's going to give the users are good, are accurate, and are repeatable. And so that is a place where we do want to make sure we don't over-rely on the AI, and there is still kind of the right guiding hand of data engineers and data analysts in curating and publishing these tool sets. To kind of dive into that note a little further, right? We have to think about what we call deterministic or non-deterministic behavior, right? A deterministic behavior is something that's going to do the same thing every time, right? And if we think of traditional data languages, that's what we have, right? If I run the same SQL query across the same data set 50 times, I will get the same answer 50 times, or certainly should. But that's not how generative AI models work. Generative AI models are non-deterministic. So that means I won't always get the same answer. And so one of the challenges in using these tools is to make sure we do it in a way where the non-deterministic behavior of generative AI is tied in with creating deterministic answers out of your data platform. If I have an executive who queries for his top 5 salespeople, and he gets a different list 3 times in a row, right? He's not going to trust that data platform anymore. Now, that might not be wrong, right? There could be ties, there could be differences in the way we're ranking or sorting, but it's different, and we need that reliability. So one of the things you'll see is rather than using the generative AI to actually answer the data question, what we're going to use is a bit more of an agentic approach where the generative AI is helping generate SQL, right, that we can actually verify that is then run for deterministic answers. And that there are ways we can teach these AI assistants patterns for queries and for specific joins to allow more predictable, more robust, and simply deterministic behavior out of this non-deterministic system. So this whole series was about adding a feature. So we do want to talk about that very quickly. It was with our Engage platform, specifically where we track consultant and improver skills. And the idea here was we already track a rather robust number of skills across our employees, but we wanted to visualize them both in this drip chart, which is what we saw over the last few weeks. But as part of that, this is also grouping skills into these new categories. And if you go back and rewatch or have already watched Eric's session from the 15th, every time the question of how we're going to group them comes together or came up, his answer was, that's a problem for the data folks. So we have to solve that today. So that is going to be kind of one key piece of what we demo is how do we do kind of our job as part of this process and create those skill category groupings and add them into our data model using generative AI tooling. And while we're at it, we're going to show some other things about the platforms as well to help answer how we address those questions and concerns I brought up earlier.
Awesome.
So with that, I'm going to drop out of PowerPoint here, and we are going to pop into demo mode. So today, I'm going to do this demo in Databricks. Why Databricks? It's a great platform. It has some really good features we can use here, but so does Fabric, so does Snowflake. What we're doing today is not truly unique to that platform. This is something that really is being built out across the different vendors. Copilot for Fabric follows the same model we're going to talk through today. Most of the things we're going to do today have similar or identical features in the other tool sets as well. But we only have an hour, so I only demo one. So this is where we're going
And to
to
be
start.
clear, we utilize all three of them. We're partners with all of them. These are definitely areas that we can help you figure out. Sometimes one tool is a little bit better depending on your use case. So looking forward to seeing this live demo though.
Absolutely. So what we're going to do here is we're going to try and do this truly live. I'm going to try and not use any of my pre-scripted or pre-prepared pieces here so that we can see how the AI really works. Because the rough edges of it are both where we can see how this really works, but also where the tools have now matured, where we can address the things that go wrong in relatively robust ways. So to start off here, we do need data. And so if you're familiar with Databricks, Unity Catalog is their kind of repository of schemas and tables. And so the one thing we have done ahead of time here is you will see I have an engage demo schema that's been created. And I pulled in a portion of engages tables. There's really a few over 100. I just pulled the skills tables in, and that is really just for purposes of simplifying the demo and not making people see enormous lists of tables, but still having enough in there where the tool is having to do some navigation and searching between these. But there's a few other things that come up because we talked or mentioned that data privacy, right, probably is a concern here. Specifically, if we look at our ABP users table, which was named that for what I'm sure is a wonderful reason that I simply don't know to explain. This contains a lot of personal information about employees. right? There are things like sign-in tokens and authenticator keys, which certainly kind of from a security standpoint, we probably don't want to post in a recorded demo, but we also don't want to publish to a generative AI tool. But there's also things like names and email addresses. And so one of the nice things here is because everything's tied together and governed in these tools, we can apply security directly on the model here that will bleed through into all of the generative AI tools. So the way we've done that is twofold. One, you'll see here I created a tag called demo security. And I have applied it to all of the fields that had a security impact or implication. And then you'll see over here, we have these column masks. And this is actually what's going to allow us to kind of change the data that someone's going to see or that the model is going to see, right? Without having done a lot of work in the models ahead of time. So right now, if I come in and create a new query, I'm in my engage demo schema. I promise you, this is the last time I'm going to write SQL by hand. We're going to use generative AI the rest. But very simply, it's starting up.
I'm guessing the table's pretty sizable.
The actual weight here is because I had not pre-spun up my warehouse.
Gotcha.
So it
Okay.
actually was starting the processes. But here is the table. But what you're going to see is we're going to have a lot of fields that actually come back as redacted, right? And then if we scroll over and look at usernames, right, we actually have them masked. And if we look at middle names, last names, full names eventually over here, you're going to see we only keep the initials, right? So that's how we, in this case, tried to make sure we don't show PII to everyone on this demo. But how did I do that? Because I didn't even write this by hand, right? I actually allowed the tool to do that for me as well. So the way I did this in Databricks, if I want to apply a mask to a column, I need a UDF, user-defined function. That's going to determine how the mask runs. And so I gave the AI prompt, create a UDF that masks all the characters before the @ symbol with the same number of star characters. And what that's actually going to do is it writes the function for me. Now, what's interesting is if I did not include this with the same number, I actually will get different results. When I tested this, if I just said, replace all the characters before the @ symbol, once it replaced them all with a single star. Another time, it replaced them with all of the stars, right? That was the non-deterministic behavior, right? So what I had to learn to do was make my prompt more specific, right? In order to get the output I wanted every time. Now, once I had this function, it certainly doesn't matter, right? That function is a function, it's deterministic, it's going to run, right? But just to prove that this does work, instead of star characters, I'm going to say, let's do $signs, right? I can say regenerate. It's going to go through. And all I did was accept what it did. And then if I select my table, much faster this time, David.
Much.
You'll see we have stars or $signs instead of stars, right? So that masking is actually happening in a real-time automated way, but it's being enforced by Unity Catalog. across all queries, including all of the ones that generative AI use. We did a similar thing for username and first names. We can say, I want to replace everything but the initials of the first and last name with 7 dashes. So it's going to write that function for me. However, what's interesting is, again, the prompt I write matters. Does it understand what first and last initial mean? So sometimes this will generate code that shows the first character of the first name and the last character of the last name, right? Other times, it does exactly what we want. So this is a place where we need to actually test or review the code it's generating, right? Or know that that's the case, and we can change the prompt, right? So in this case, the change to the prompt could be, for instance, instead of the initial of the first and last name, could be the first character of each name, right? And that actually will get it to be where we want it to go. So in this case, right, we can actually look and see it took the name field and the surname field, right? So the first name and the last name, and then did take the first character of each. So in this case, first and last name, it found the columns, right? It is able to do this correctly. Again, you've got to be careful with your prompts. That's not always true. So now I want to show a slightly different problem, which is I had tagged a bunch of fields as demo security. I would like those to be fully redacted. I don't want to mask them. I want them to come back with the word redacted. So again, I don't want to change the data. I don't want to write a pipeline. So I could, for instance, give it this prompt. Create a UDF that replaces the content of a column with redacted and apply it to all columns on the ABP users table in the engage demo schema that have a demo security tag value of true. Now that seems very wordy, right? Why did it end up being this wordy? Well, there's multiple copies of the ABP users table. So I did need to tell it I want to be in the engage demo schema, because otherwise sometimes it could pick the same table that I named, but out of, for instance, my staging environment where we landed this data. But with that kind of specific prompt, it actually will do a great job. It creates this, right? And then you'll see here what it did was it created the UDF, and then it showed us how it would work, right, on all of the columns. But it didn't actually do the piece where I asked it to apply the redaction to everything with a demo security tag value. And that is in part because what I'm using here is the coding assistant that's part of the editor window. And that is really meant more for code snippets. It doesn't do quite as much thinking as I need it to do in this case. So I'm actually going to reject that. And instead of clicking edit here or Control I to open up this editor, I'm going to click the other little AI icon here, which actually brings up the coding assistant, right? And the coding assistant is, in this case, a more robust coding assistant that can do multi-step tasks. So if I paste the exact same prompt in here, you're going to see, right, it actually explains what it's going to do, right? It needs to create the function and then apply the mask. And so it creates the function here. And then it gives us the template for how to apply the mask. Okay. But again, it has not given us the code that actually lists out the columns. Sometimes it does, right? This is non-determinism, right, in real time. But I can say, well, it knows I need that list of columns. So it'll actually write the query that gives us that. If I pop this over and click this button and try and run it, ooh, it didn't work. Why didn't it work? I don't know. Let's diagnose the error, right? And then it's going to see, oh, it was using some of the wrong column names for the views. And so sometimes you got to do a few passes here, right? And as you do, there we go. Even though, right, this tool certainly knows ahead of time, right, what the information schema includes, it's non-deterministic, right? And so that's the first time I had to hit diagnose twice, right? But these are the steps you have to go through when you're using these tools around data, because everything is very, very specific, right, in the code we're talking about here. So you'll see in this case, it actually did pull back my list. And I can continue to chat in this context, right, using the column list returned above. Apply the action column mask to all columns with a demo security tag. And it's going to think for a minute. And notice it gave us another template, right? It didn't actually do it. This is interesting because it will actually sometimes write the updates for me. However, when it does, we normally only get 4 to 5 columns. It turns out there should be 32, right? So this is a place when we say we can't just take the AI and over rely on it. I can actually use the AI to write these templates. What I actually did in this case was I simply broke this into 3 steps. I said, write the UDF, give me the column list. And then I actually passed the column list back in and said, write my update statements. And that worked great. But the purely conversational approach here, while it does normally get me something that isn't just a templated column, it doesn't necessarily give me that full robust coverage. So those are places where we still need to make sure as data engineers, right, or as database administrators, that we're using the tools, but kind of validating what we get out of them.
So, Rich, it felt a little bit like trial and error, but I like the way that you use the term conversational, right? So it's more back and forth, like here's where we're trying to go and we need to go together, right? And I
That's
can
right.
lean on that tool to say, well, let's try again, maybe move a little more in this direction, or let's try again and move a little more in this direction.
And I mean, not to understate what it's done, right? If I don't know Databricks at all, right, if I'm moving from another tool, I also, right, don't know where to get the column names and where to check these tags that can be applied to columns in Unity, et cetera. And it did navigate that for me very cleanly, right? I did have to hit diagnose twice, but in the end, I wrote no code, and it was able to do that. It's going to get more interesting here because now that we have the security kind of in place, and we've shown kind of how that interacts with the AI, and how we used the AI to put the security in place, we're going to actually get back to our engage feature. And that kind of becomes the most interesting piece of what we're going to do here today. So I'm going to clear my assistant out just so that the demo looks cleaner. I didn't actually need to clear the context there, and start a new query editor window. In this case, what we want to do right, is create this skill mapping, right? That was the task left for the data team. So I can start here by saying, for instance, show a list of all employee skills. Told you I wouldn't write any more SQL myself. So what's going to be interesting here, employee skills group by skill, right? It's pretty simple SQL that's wrong.
Ooh.
However, again, if I diagnose the error, say fix my code, it actually is able to do that, right? Now, in this case, it did the skill definition ID. I would like return me the actual skill name to come back. So you'll see here, I just highlighted one area of the code because I could essentially scope my AI assistant to only changing that piece. However, right, because I did that, and I did that on purpose here, right, I'm getting an error again. And that error is sd.name. And the reason is it assumes we're using query patterns where we use aliases for our tables. And because I did not let it edit the whole query, it essentially couldn't tell that I wasn't. So when we talked about kind of the bias and the patterns, right, that it assumes I'm using, in that case, I gave it something very small to change, but it assumed I was using a standardized pattern. Interestingly, a standardized pattern that it didn't enforce, right, in its non-deterministic generation. So I can tell it to diagnose the error. It would figure it out. Or I can be lazy and do that. Oh, and there's still an error. So we will actually let it diagnose there. The demo gods are not playing well here. So we are actually just going to show you guys the skills and then move on to actually mapping them. So we have these skill definition IDs. This table, notice, does not have a skill name in it, right? And that's actually the other reason this didn't work. We can tell the UI, the AI, how to better find that though. And the way we do that is back in Unity Catalog, each table gets an overview that details what's in it. You can also apply these to columns. However, it's a lot of work, right? This is the same problem data dictionaries have always had, right? Somebody's got to go in and type in a whole lot of things. However, I can AI generate my column comments. I can AI generate my table descriptions. And it's going to go through and look at the contents of the data, right? And then create those for me. If I create these and save them, right, it actually uses these when it's generating the code, right? And that will help it, for instance, realizing that the skill name doesn't happen to be in the skills table, right? However, we have a feature to build. So let's go back to our editor and build this feature. So you remember, I can use this, or I can use the multi-step AI, right? The agentic approach here. I'm going to go with the multi-step approach, and it's specifically because I want to show you something. So the prompt I'm going to put in here is group employee skills into the following categories: product management, delivery management, agility, Scrum, UX, development, data, marketing, and create a table with the skill name to skill group mappings.
Hey,
Now
Rich.
notice, yes.
Can you fix the spelling on agility?
No,
Okay, no problem.
I could, but I want to show you what it does.
Yeah.
So, interestingly, in the first pass here, right, you'll see it's actually found a large number of our skills and it has mapped them. And in this case, it has not corrected that spelling, right?
Okay.
However, I can tell it to be smarter about this, right? So, first, fix the spelling of agility. And it does.
Yes.
Right? However, this is not a full list. If I look, we have a lot more skills than it's come up with here. Right? Very similar to when I told it to apply masks to columns, and I said it would often come back with just 3 to 5 columns. So I can instead tell it to make the skill category mapping more complete and include all skills. Hey, that's better,
Wow.
right? However, there's a number of things here it still hasn't mapped because I've not actually told it how to map anything, right? It is mapping data into data, right? Marketing into marketing and SEO into marketing, all through the LLM, right? I did not give it any context other than the words. That's worked pretty well. But if we actually applied this and ran forward, we would see there's going to be a number of things that aren't listed because they have an unknown mapping, right? Specifically, one of the ones we're going to see is that I don't see data, I don't see languages listed here. I don't see Java, I don't see C#, I don't see Python, right? And those are definitely in our skills list. So I want to tell it to update that list to include all the development languages that it finds. Right? And this is where it is that conversation, right? It's building, right? The feature for me. It's building the mappings. It's doing so much work here, but I still have to guide it. Now you'll see it found Python, R, Scala, Java, Go, and SQL, and added them all into the development mapping. So great, but I did need a little bit of back and forth. What it's doing now is it's saying, hey, do you want me to go through and identify cloud platform skills or security related skills?
Oh.
Right? It's able to look and see what I've been coaching it to do. And it's coming back and saying, hey, you probably want us to do it in these places as well.
It's almost using it like a template for other like things, the similarity.
That's right. So now you'll see here, it even gave me a comment so that I can see what it changed, right? And it added more security related skills into the DevOps platform. At no point did I tell it security is part of DevOps, right? Those are the things that it was able to just kind of bring to the table on its own as I used this assistant window, right? So we could keep going through this, right? We could add more, or I can say this is great. I like this. Save the results to a table called skill category mappings. Now, in this case, the coding assistant's going to be a little bit careful. It doesn't actually just do it, but it gives me the code to do it, right? And I can hit go, and it will do that, right? So in this case, right, we just created a table. If I wanted to edit this more or look at it more, right, I could pop it out over here, right? I could continue to add things. I can continue to work with it. and move back and forth.
Nice.
So at this point, we in 30 seconds, right? 2 minutes of demo time, actually built our feature. This was the work. So great, we did it, right? We spent a lot of time talking about how we set up and secured things, but the actual feature, the AI was able to write for me very quickly. We didn't have great business requirements that defined the mappings. I was comfortable letting it make them up, right? And it seems to have done a very good job of that, right? And we could continue to refine it back and forth if we wanted. But now I want to go to the last thing we said we'd show, which is the democratizing of querying this data. Because everything we've done here is a very developer-focused and centric approach, right? We're using a coding assistant. We're using inline coding templates in AI, right? This is a data engineer. This is absolutely not something you're going to give to a business user and say, great, you have a data model. If you ask it questions, it'll write SQL you don't understand, and you'll hit diagnose a few times and it'll go through, right? That's not what we want. And so that's where we switch to a different tool inside the platform to say, look, now we want to talk about agents that users can use. We want to talk about generative AI where they can ask natural language questions. For Databricks, that's called Genie. So if I come over here to Genie, what you do is you create a Genie space. And for time's sake, I'm not going to go through the full creation process here, but it is as simple as, let's go find the data that we want to include for our users here. Right? Select the data that we want the users to be able to access or query. Okay. Now, I've already curated that into this Genie space, so hooray. We have those 23 tables, right? Which include ABP users, but also skill category mapping, which is the table we just created. So now, right, I want to begin to give this out to users, right? Well, I also want to give them a better experience. There are things I may know about the data that they don't. And so that's where we can begin to put some guardrails and some guides into this agent ahead of when the business users come to play. So for instance, we can add instructions, right? These are just prompts, right? And so interestingly here, my first prompt, right, is enforcing a masking, right? Not at the catalog level, right? The way we did it before, but I can put this in here. Users aren't going to be able to edit it. In this case, I'm asking it to come up with a fake first name, right? Every time. Skill categories are defined in the mapping table and are linked by skill name. And I don't ever want to see employees with the VP or president titles. Okay, so what's this do for us? Well, I can simply ask it a question, right? And it's going to go behind the scenes, right? It's doing some of the same things it did in the generative assistant earlier, where it's creating plans, it's going through, it's writing SQL. But in this case, because it's the end user experience, it's not showing me everything, and it is running it itself. So what it comes back with is it says, hey, we found relevant data in these tables, right? It's going to tell us things that it had to assume, right? And then it is eventually going to populate this table, right? If I want, I can actually see the code it writes, but an end user doesn't want to, right? So in this case, notice, right? I've got fake first names. This is really interesting because the fake first names are in fact different each time because it's non-deterministic. I didn't tell it to create a static list. So I've not seen it use so many variations of Jake before. Last time I did it, A was Angela, right? That's non-deterministic. So we have to be careful. But seems to have pulled back the data just fine.
Okay.
What's really kind of impressive to me here is getting an employee name and a skill name is actually not straightforward in our model. We have to take our employees table and the ABP users table and join them together. However, they do not follow the standard database pattern of saying, well, we have a user ID or an employee ID, and that's what we join on. Each table just has an ID column. And in this particular case, those IDs match and should be joined together, which is kind of a non-standard approach. It was able to figure that out, right? It was able to figure that out mostly because I let it auto-generate column definitions in the catalog earlier. However, there could be things that are harder or that it doesn't get, or I want to make sure, right, that it always knows how to join those tables together correctly. So I can come in here and say, you know what, I actually want to add in ID to ID. And it now knows and can learn and use that. So again, my users don't have to see this part, but now I can be confident that when my users use this model, it'll always know how to navigate between those tables. I've told it very specifically how to do so.
Okay.
I might, though, say, you know what, I don't want to, right, go through, but I have a lot of queries, right, that people have already run or already used in reports. So in those cases, you can actually just put in example queries. So you could take your existing reports, pull their queries, drop them in here, and it'll use those as guidance, and it will learn the rules from them. And notice here, right, we can actually add parameters. We can give it text to say what it should see out of them if we want it to learn kind of specific patterns or ways to join. But we can kind of begin to craft this tool, right, to give our users the experience we want them to have.
So this is
And then,
almost a form of reinforcement learning for the system.
oh, that's a great piece, because the next thing I'm going to show, David, is in fact reinforcement learning is built in. So if I come back in here, if I hadn't clicked on the wrong thing, right? And so I'm going to list all employees and their skills and skill categories. So in this case, right, I didn't really need to do this again, but since I closed the window out, I had to do this again. As it runs through here, when it's done, you'll actually see there's a button at the bottom that pops up. And it essentially says, is this a good answer or not? And you can tell it whether or not you're happy with the answer, right? And it is reliable. And it will learn from that. However, what's even neater, we got to wait for the generation here so that I can show you.
There you go.
There we go. So, well, it's still putting the last bits together. But I can also say, hey, if this isn't right, I want to fix it. And I can give it natural language, right? Prompt on what I don't like about the answer, right? For instance, if I saw David's name in here, right, I would know that it's not properly filtering out presidents and VPs. And so I could actually give it that feedback. But I don't necessarily expect my end users, right, are going to be able to do that or know to do that. So instead, there is also a button that says, I don't know, but something's wrong, right? Where a user can kind of just throw their hands up and say, this isn't what I expected, and I don't know why. Or I just don't trust it. Can you verify it? And that will then show up here in the monitoring tab, right? So these are all of the natural language queries I've run against this model. And you'll see here are ones where I gave it feedback that it was bad. I didn't like the result. This one was good. But interesting, I have this requested, right? So I can, as the data engineer, open this up and it's going to say, okay, what was the prompt, right? In this case, create a graph of the current skill categories and how much employees have each skill. It shows me everything that it showed the user, including the graph it created, right? You see that, was it correct, right? And follow-ups that the user made, right? So it's giving me their whole kind of chat session. And then finally here, this is the place where they said, is this right? That was the comment I gave myself, right?
Okay.
Well, the user never saw this query. They could have if they wanted to, but they didn't have to. They were simply able to say, hey, they asked, are there any employees with DevOps skills and data-related skills? It said there's 347. I want to know if that number's right. I can now query this, check it, say, yes, this is correct and accurate. Mark is reviewed. I could have previewed, I could have edited the code, I could have said it was bad and given it instructions, but it is going to use this as reinforcement learning and as context in the model. You also have the ability to set benchmarks. Benchmarks are really interesting because when I set a benchmark, I give it a prompt, and then I give it the actual answer, right? So the prompt could be, how many employees have data ops, or data, sorry, and DevOps skills? Now, I can have it automatically generate my ground truth answer here, so I can edit it. Or I could provide the query that I know's right, that I wrote. And once I do that, right, we're going to assume it wrote this correctly this time. I can say add that benchmark. You'll see here, what is the total count of employees is a benchmark I added. And in that case, right, I wrote the query and I added in a filter to make sure we're filtering out the titles correctly. So this is the verified query. This is the prompt. And so now I can, on a schedule, I can, on a repeated basis, run my benchmarks. And what it'll actually do is go through and run everything via the natural language prompts and verify the results with the grounded answers we gave it. So as you continue to update your models, this essentially becomes a testing script, right? That will run through a regression to make sure your model is still giving accurate answers, right? And is giving those consistent deterministic answers time after time. So in this case, you can see, right? Here's what the model generated. Here was the ground truth answer, and they matched.
Excellent.
Right? Now it's going to do that for employees. You'll see in this case, the generated SQL probably is going to look a little different than the ground truth answer because this ground truth answer was handwritten. So notice things aren't fully qualified, etc., because I'm a lazy developer. But again,
But they
right,
match.
the number of employees matched. And so it is able to take those instructions we gave it and actually put the filter in itself, right? So I didn't have to prompt it for that. This is a test that my instructions are working and being applied through the model correctly.
That's awesome.
So finally, just so that we, end this with some cool stuff, I promised things that could go into a dashboard. And people like visuals. And data people hate pie charts because they're always used incorrectly. So I decided I would show you a pie chart. Because people love to see them, but data developers hate to create them. So in this case, I said, show a pie chart of skills by category for whatever employee has the largest number of skills. Well, the employee with the largest number of skills in this database had 97 development, 10 other, 6 agile, 2 UI, product management, and delivery management, right? And it created, right, a nice, well, I might say, you know what? Remove the legend and update the graph for all employees. And it's going to go in and it's going to change what it's graphing, right? And so I'm actually able to use this to create visuals that I can then share and make part of dashboards. In this case, you're going to see the skill distribution. I don't know why it just kind of blanked on my screen. It did show up for a second there. I know you all saw it. We're pretty heavy in development. It's probably not super shocking, but I'm really interested to see what are our non-development skills. So remove the development category from the chart. What it's doing now, right, is continuing to just do these natural language prompts, create what we need. Is this correct? Fix it, request review, just like we talked about before. And then notice it's giving me other prompts it thinks I might be interested in, right? Based on the queries and what it can see in the data model. So it really is kind of a faster way for people to be able to ask questions of your data.
Yeah, you've done a great job of showing us the power of Databricks, the depth which it can take you to with that conversational, the back and forth, really helping us to figure out, how we can avoid some of the patterns and biases that we might introduce into that, as well as putting up guardrails for some of those users as they go in. Thank you for capping off a fantastic series as we built out this feature in Engage. And for folks that didn't catch those first shows, those are hosted on our YouTube. So we will put the link in the chat where you can go find those prior sessions and walk through this process. So I want to thank thank you, Rich. Thank you, all the presenters that came and joined me over the course of the month. Thank you, Improving Tech Team, for hosting this for us. And we look forward to seeing you again.
Thanks, everyone.